Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
The midday sun stood at its zenith, bathing them in unforgiving heat. Brendan wiped sweat from his brow with the heel of his hand, then dried it on the edge of his shirt. "Christ, it's hot," Brendan said. "Remind me never to go to an amusement park in the summer again." Callie nodded, her damp hair swinging.
"It wouldn't be so bad if this line would move. At least there'll be a breeze on the roller coaster."
The line ahead of them stretched until Brendan couldn't see the entrance to the ride. The people in front of him talked in a low murmur. He absent-mindedly scratched his arm and stared into the distance at the shimmering heat on the asphalt. "It feels like we've been here forever," he said. "What time is it?" She looked at her phone.
"Noon."
"When was the last time I asked?"
"Noon,"
she said, then leaned close and wrapped her arm around his waist.
"Cheer up. It's hot, but it's a beautiful day. We're going to have fun, right?"
He smiled, buoyed up by her enthusiasm. "Yeah, of course." Far overhead, the roller coaster's car sped by, going into a loop. The cars hung upside down for a few seconds, then zoomed off again, the screams of the occupants following behind. "That did not sound fun," Brendan said, annoyed.
"But it is,"
Callie said.
"It loops and you're just hanging there, and it feels like it'll never move. Then you take off again like a rocket."
"I'm glad we waited on lunch," he said. Brendan grasped the rail and leaned to the side, trying to get a better look at the front of the line.
"What are you looking at? Some hot girl up there?"
Callie said playfully. "Everyone here is hot."
"Okay, smartass,"
she said.
"Seriously."
He shook his head. "Nothing, just seeing if anyone is moving."
"The wait is part of the experience,"
Callie said.
"Now stop complaining. This is the first time I've ever talked you into getting on a ride."
Brendan chuckled, remembering their morning together. "Well, you can be very persuasive."
"Brendan, shut up,"
she whispered, blushing. "I will as soon as this line—" The line began to move forward.
"See?"
Callie asked.
"All part of the experience."
He followed along at a snail's pace, barely doing more than shuffling his feet. He could see the entrance to the park off to his left. "Funway Amusement Park," the sign read in huge yellow letters, "where the fun never ends." Brendan silently hoped it would soon. Christ, it was hot. It felt like the soles of his sneakers were sticking to the concrete stovetop beneath his feet. They came to a sudden halt. Brendan nearly tripped while trying not to run into the couple in front of him. Somewhere behind them, a baby began to cry. His patience was gone instantly.
"Damn it! We only moved 3 feet, and now we have to hear that." "Chill, okay?"
Callie said. "I'm trying, but that crying feels like it's in my head," he said.
"Who in the hell leaves a baby out in this heat?" "I don't know,"
Callie said.
"But don't let it ruin your good time."
The baby's cries seemed to rise an octave. Brendan winced as sweat ran into one of his eyes. He lifted his shirt and used it to wipe his face. "This is bullshit. I tried, okay? But I've had enough. It's too hot for this." She pressed against him.
"We've already waited all this time. You can't leave now."
The tension behind his eyes felt like a weight. "I'm ready to go."
"Don't make a scene,"
she said, squeezing his arm. "I'm not," he hissed. "That's screaming. I have to get out of here." He tapped the shoulder of the man behind him. "Hey, can we get by? We're leaving." The man didn't turn around. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Mind letting us pass?" No response. Brendan stared angrily at the back of the man's head. "Fine," he said, then turned to the woman standing next to the man. "Excuse me, can we—" He trailed off. "Callie," he said softly, "why are they all looking away? The line is going that way. Why is everyone turned around?" Callie tugged on his arm.
"Come on, the line is moving."
Brendan allowed himself to be pulled away, still looking over his shoulder at the back of the line. The baby's cry echoed overhead. He shook his head as dizziness washed over him. "I'm not feeling good," he said. The line was really moving now, and he found himself nearly jogging to keep up. He tried to slow down, but was shoved from behind. "Hey!" he yelled, wheeling around, his fist pulled back. It was just people as far as he could see, and all of them facing away from him. Callie pulled him with a strength that defied her frame.
Hurry!
The entrance loomed ahead, a circle within a circle within a circle, all ringed with lights. The coaster's cars came screeching to a halt, sparks flying from the tracks. He'd never seen roller coaster cars like them. They were black and completely enclosed, their paint flaking and showing the orange-red rust beneath. Its doors rose slowly with a hiss of steam. No one stepped out. The operator faced away from them, one hand on the lever, the other turning the knob on an old radio. There was a burst of static, followed by a voice over the radio.
"Tragic news today,"
the voice on the radio said. Callie stepped onto the platform, still holding his arm. I can't, Brendan panted. "I don't want to, okay? Let's just go back."
That's what you always say.
Callie said, grinning.
Now get in.
"Always? What are you talking about?" Callie helped him into the car, and he offered no resistance. It was oppressively hot, the cracked vinyl seat burning his thighs through his pants as he sat down. "Does the window come down?" he asked, his hands on the glass. "It's so hot."
No,
Callie said.
you know that.
She shut the door. "Hey!" he cried. "What are you doing?" Static crackled.
police found the body of 1-year-old Taylor Hollis. She had been left in a locked car.
"Callie!" Brendan cried as panic gripped him. "Open the door!"
Outside of the condemned Funway amusement park, a known location for drug activity.
The operator pulled the lever. The car shook and began to move forward.
Also in the vehicle was the body of 28-year-old Brendan Hollis, dead of an apparent overdose.
He cried out as the hammer blow of realization fell upon him. Brendan began to weep as memories coursed through him like an electric current. Buying the junk, melting it down, pushing the plunger down on the syringe, the cottony bliss traveling up his arm and into his brain. The crying was so loud, but serenity had been sweet enough to drown it out. "I'm so sorry," Brendan screamed. "I never meant to hurt Taylor. I swear. It was an accident, goddammit. Please don't do this. Please."
Ex-wife Callie Hollis refused to comment.
The car began to climb the first of many hills towards endless loops. The midday sun stood at its zenith, bathing them in unforgiving heat. Brendan wiped sweat from his brow with the heel of his hand, then dried it on the edge of his shirt.
Christ, it's hot, Brendan said. Remind me never to go to an amusement park in the summer again.
Callie nodded, her damp hair swinging.
It wouldn't be so bad if this line would move. At least there'll be a breeze on the roller coaster.
The line ahead of them stretched until Brendan couldn't see the entrance to the ride. The people in front of him talked in a low murmur. He absent-mindedly scratched his arm and stared into the distance at the shimmering heat on the asphalt.
It feels like we've been here forever,
he said.
I wasn't sure what I was more surprised to discover. The ragged hole in my backyard, or the man stuck in it. The hole was a crack about 8 feet long and maybe 2 feet thick at its widest point. It looked as if the earth had just pulled apart, separating like a wet paper towel. It had not been there yesterday, I'm certain I would have noticed. Likewise, I would have noticed a person in my yard, especially one struggling to escape a hole. Not that he was struggling when I found him. By then, he was just slumped over, looking resigned to being trapped from the waist down in a hole forever. Honestly, I was a little afraid that he was dead at first, but he lifted his head when he heard my footsteps approaching. "Hey, do you need help?" I called, sort of a stupid opener. What was he going to say? "No, I like it fine in this hole, thanks." Obviously, he needed help. "Yeah, I'm kinda stuck," he said. We were both really nailing it on the scintillating conversation. "So, what happened?" I asked, drawing closer. I eyed the ground warily. I wasn't sure what caused the crack, and I didn't want to be too close to it if it suddenly expanded. "I was hiking around in the woods." He waved a hand vaguely in the direction of the forest that backed onto my property. "Got lost, came out here, thought I was saved. Then, bam! Ground fell out from underneath my feet and I tumbled in here. Must have been a sinkhole or something. My leg's twisted and I can't get any leverage. I yelled for a while, but your house is a pretty good distance off that way. So I was just conserving my energy for a bit, figuring out a new plan." He grinned wryly. "I hadn't really come up with one, so I'm glad you came along." He was talking a pretty good game, but I could see from the sweat on his pale skin that he wasn't doing so well. I thought about going back to the house for some sort of tool, but I wasn't sure what would work for this. A winch, maybe? But I didn't have one of those. Maybe just a length of rope. Honestly, I couldn't think of anything that would work better than just grabbing him under the arms and hauling him up. To do that, though, I was going to have to straddle the hole in the ground. It wasn't a hard step physically. The crack was slightly less than shoulder width, but I had no idea how deep it went or when it might spread larger again. It had opened up between one step and the next the first time. What would happen if it shifted again when I had a leg on the other side? I knew exactly what would happen. I'd fall screaming into the darkness below, along with my new friend. I could picture it with perfect clarity, and I didn't care for the image at all. I could hardly leave the guy stranded in a hole, though, and delaying wasn't going to help things along. So I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped across the crack. "I'm gonna grab you under the shoulders," I told the stranger, bending down. "I'll lift up while you push however you..." Whew. Oh, that's some stink coming up from there. "Oh, yeah, that sulfur stink? I finally stopped smelling it. Figure my nose shut down after the first few hours. Oh, it's something else, though. Honestly, I was real worried I was suspended over your septic system or something." "Not this far back," I assured him. "But yeah, there's sure something down there. Whoa." I took shallow breaths to avoid taking in too much of the warm, stench-laden air. "Come on, let's get you out of there. On 3. 1, 2, 3. I pulled as hard as I could. The stranger scrabbled at the broken edges of the dirt with his hands and twisted his hips back and forth, trying to rotate to a position of greater freedom. I was starting to see spots when suddenly, with a cry that was half pain and half relief, the man slid free of the earth's grasp. I deposited him, none too gently, on the ground, hopping clear of the hole to make sure I didn't end up in the predicament I'd just freed him from. "Man, you were really in there. How are you doing?" I could see the answer with my own eyes. His right leg was twisted, not fully backward or anything, but definitely further than it ought to go. He didn't seem to be moving either leg as he lay there panting. He reached his hands down to his legs and felt around, as if confirming they were still there. "Still got feeling," he said. "Gotta say, I was a bit worried about that. They've been kind of folded up in there for a bit." He braced himself on his elbows and rolled up to a half-kneeling position. "I think I can't..." His right leg gave out as he tried to put weight on it, spilling him back onto the ground. I hurried to his side and crouched next to him, offering him support and stability. "Come on, let's get you back on your pins. See if you can walk this off a bit." With my help, he regained his feet. His left leg supported his weight without issue, but I felt him halfway collapse onto me as he tested his right leg again. I looked over to see him gritting his teeth, holding back the pain. "Hey, it's all right. Lean on me," I told him. "Come on. We'll get you back to the house." With him hanging off of my shoulder, I made my way back across the yard toward my house. I could tell that he was fading as we went, because he kept putting more and more of his weight on me. That was basically fine until about halfway across the yard when suddenly he got heavy. Not like leaning a bit harder heavy, like doubled his weight heavy. I stumbled, dropping to one knee. Without me to lean on, the stranger fell forward. He was pretty clearly unconscious as he fell past, but that wasn't what grabbed my attention. I was more focused on how red his skin had gotten, and the two jet black horns jutting out of his forehead. He definitely hadn't had those before. It's the kind of thing that catches the eye. The vision, if that's what it was, only lasted for the split second while he was toppling to the ground. As soon as he hit, he let out a moan of pain, and just like that, he was back to normal. Sorry, I exclaimed, getting him upright again. His weight was back to normal along with the rest of him. I brushed my hand against his forehead as I was getting his arms settled around my shoulders, and I felt nothing but skin. By all appearances, he was a regular person. I knew what I'd seen, though. Impossible though it was. He'd had the visage of a demon. The rest of the way back to the house, I kept stealing glances at him, trying to see through his disguise again. Try as I might, though, I could see nothing but the human. I could almost believe that he was a person, that I'd imagined it, but it all fit too neatly. I'd believed his story, odd though it was. I'd accepted that he was just a lost hiker who had happened onto my property just as a surprise sinkhole that stank of sulfur opened beneath him, trapping him. It was a crazy story, but there he was in the hole, and there didn't seem to be any better explanation since demons weren't real. But if demons were real, then it was really straining credulity to ask me to believe that he wasn't one who had just crawled up from hell. And what I had seen in that fleeting moment was definitely a demon. I still walked him into my house, though. I helped him limp up the steps of the back deck. I got him to the guest room and sat him down on the bed. I told him to make himself comfortable, and I went to get him some water while I tried to figure out exactly what on earth I was doing. On the face of it, inviting a demon into my house seemed like a great way to get my face ripped off. It was pretty hard to picture this guy as a threat, though. One of his legs wasn't working, and he was absolutely exhausted on top of it. The more I thought about it, the more likely it seemed that the reason his disguise had slipped was that he had passed out on the way to the house. If he couldn't even walk across the yard, what kind of threat could he really pose? Anyway, demons weren't the only thing in hell. Souls got cast down there on the regular, according to the church crowd. You were supposed to get wings and a halo when you went to heaven. Maybe everyone who went to hell got horns. It was possible that this was a soul who'd found some way to sneak out. For that matter, this could all be some kind of divine test. Honestly, the whole thing was starting to open up theological questions that I wasn't all that keen on thinking about. It had been a lot of years since I'd been to church. Now that I had a demon in my guest room, that was starting to feel like a questionable decision. The water glass overflowed, jerking me back to reality. I shut off the faucet and wondered briefly if I could bless the water. Probably you needed a priest for that, but then again, anyone could say grace. So maybe not? I decided that giving a demon a glass of holy water to drink was uncharitable in any case, so I just brought it in as it was. He accepted it with thanks and drank greedily, emptying the entire glass in one go. Need more? I asked. No. Can you do me a favor? I don't think anything's broken in my leg, but it's definitely twisted. I think maybe my knee's dislocated. Can you help me straighten it out? I looked at his leg, which was still at a slightly odd angle. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can grip and twist just fine, I guess. Can't imagine it's gonna feel good, though. It'll feel better than leaving it. He propped his leg up on the bed and gripped his thigh. Okay, grab it there by the shin. Twist it to my right when I say go. Ready? Go! I twisted his leg, and 3 noises sounded almost simultaneously. The first, by the barest of margins, was his scream. The second was a pop, a thick noise of tendons releasing stress. The third was a heavy groaning from the bed, as if it had suddenly taken on an extra load. My eyes snapped up to see the stranger's face. Sure enough, he was slumped over, having fainted from the pain. His skin was again the mottled red of live embers, and his hair flopped over 2 dull horns, each the length of the first joint of my thumb. After a moment, he groaned, and his eyes fluttered briefly. As they did, his disguise reasserted itself. The horns vanished along with his fiery coloration, and the bed creaked again, relaxing as his full demonic weight was lifted. I averted my eyes back to his leg and pretended that my attention had been there the entire time. Wow, he said. Okay, that sucked, but I can bend it now. He suited action to word, wincing as he did so. Well, a little bit, anyway. Probably ought to have a doctor look at that, I told him. He waved his hand dismissively. Nah, I should be able to walk it off. The bad bit's done now. Give it the evening to rest at least. You have anyone waiting for you? No. He shook his head ruefully. Wouldn't have been hiking alone if I did. Well, you can stay here tonight, and we'll figure out getting you back to your car tomorrow if your leg's better. Oh, yeah. That's way on the other side of the woods. I'll have to figure out where I parked it. It was a little gravel lot on the side of the highway. Not much more than a wide spot by the trailhead. Got the address in your phone or anything? Phone was in my backpack. I managed to knock that into the hole while I was trying to get free. I nodded as if this made sense. Well, we'll figure it out. There was an awkward silence for a moment. I made my excuses and left him alone, retreating to the safety of my basement game room to gather my thoughts. I knocked pool balls around the table as I tried to figure out what his plan was. Escape from hell, sure. Rural nowhere wasn't much of a place to invade, though, and obviously, things hadn't gone quite according to plan. He'd been pretty solidly stuck when I found him. Maybe something had tried to close the exit on him to prevent him from getting out? If so, that favored the theory that he was a damned soul escaping and not a demon invading. That didn't necessarily mean he was any better or I was any safer. Humans do some horrible stuff. It felt better if he was human, though. It made his disguise more honest, and I felt I could understand his motivations better. If I were in hell and found a way out, I'd take it too. And I probably wouldn't tell the truth to whoever found me because I wouldn't want to get locked up in the nut house immediately after escaping from hell. Of course, there was always still the outside chance that he was actually a hiker and that I was having some sort of hallucination. I was certain that this wasn't the case, but crazy people always think they're sane, so I couldn't fully discount it. A thought occurred to me. If there actually was a backpack in the hole, that would show that he had been telling the truth. It would be easy enough to check on. Bring out a flashlight, check the bottom of the hole, see if there was a backpack there. If there was one, I was crazy and he was just a hiker with absurdly bad luck. I laughed as I considered it. Imagine getting totally lost in the woods, then finding your way out only to have the ground crack open underneath you. Then being rescued by a crazy person who thought you were a demon? That kind of luck could give you whiplash. Above me, I heard the bed groan and the floor creak as if a heavy weight had just settled. I frowned for a second, then realized that my visitor had likely just fallen asleep and settled back into his demonic form. Hellish form, I corrected myself. Not a demon. Probably. I ascended the stairs as quietly as I could, then sneaked down the hallway. I eased open the door to the guest room and peeked inside. My guest was asleep with his back to the door and the comforter pulled over himself, but the mattress was sagging under his weight and one red, clawed foot was sticking out from beneath the covers. I closed the door with barely a click. After liberating a flashlight from the hall closet, I made my way out of the house, listening the whole time for that telltale creak to let me know that he was awake again. It never came, though, and once I was outside, I began to breathe easily again. The hole looked no different from how I had left it just a short while before. I got down on my stomach and crawled the last half-dozen feet or so, just in case anything else was inclined to give way. Nothing did, however, and shortly I found myself peering into a deep black chasm. The sulfurous smell hit me again, and I leaned away to take a deep breath before moving back to see what was inside. The flashlight illuminated the rocky walls and some occasional small ledges, but no clear bottom. The crack seemed to grow wider as it descended, as if I were looking down through the top of a great empty pyramid. It was not a particularly comfortable sensation. I shone the light around, but saw no backpack or even any space where one might have come to rest. I wanted to be thorough, though. Obviously, the lack of a backpack didn't necessarily mean that my guest was lying, but the presence of one would definitely exonerate him. So I wanted to be sure that I had checked as carefully as possible. I stuck my arm into the hole, searching the walls for a snagged pack or even just a scrap of fabric. I found nothing but torn earth. After a moment, I concluded that there was no backpack to be seen and pulled my arm back. That was when something brushed against my hand. There's no sugarcoating it. I screamed. It was high-pitched and embarrassing. I yanked my hand back, banging the knuckles on the rocky wall hard enough to jar my fingers open. The flashlight tumbled from my grip. It spiraled away into the pit, flashing end over end until the light was too distant to see. As far as I could tell, it never reached a bottom. I skittered backward and sat there on my knees for a minute, holding my bruised hand and staring at the pit. After a minute had passed and nothing had risen up to attack me, I moved slowly forward again and risked a look inside. There, tucked up into a small crevice beneath the lip of the hole and almost impossible to see, was a leather pack. A cord dangled from the side. It was this that had touched my arm. So he is just a hiker, then, I thought, pulling the pack out of the hole to examine it. Doubts immediately began to creep back in. It was far too heavy and didn't look much like a hiking backpack. It was just a folded-over roll made of some pale leather and tied shut with a braided cord of the same material. I untied the pack and let the leather flop open. Inside were several pieces of gleaming bronze armor, but I barely saw them. I was staring raptly at the sword. It was beautiful and terrifying. Its blade was translucent and almost glowing, like the tail of a comet. It was feather light when I picked it up. I knew it had to be razor sharp. Nothing this perfect could ever fail at such a basic aspect of its being. 2 words were carved into the hilt: Malum Interfectorum. I knew that this meant Doomslayer, just as I knew that this was the sword's name and its purpose for being. To hold it was to know these things. It ached to be wielded. It longed to be put to use. I could not imagine such a stunning weapon being trapped in hell. It had to have been stolen from the angels, to have languished there until the man I had found, the demon, the soul, whatever, had stolen it once more. Perhaps it had even let him out. A blade such as this would always know the way free from such confines. I was startled from my reverie by a voice from behind. "So," said my visitor, "you have found my armor." I turned and beheld him in his demonic visage. The idea that he might have been a trapped soul fled. I had previously caught only glimpses of his form, and had lied to myself that there was humanity beneath it. The thing that stood before me had nothing in common with a man. It was sharp, ageless, and cruel. Still, it had rescued this sword from the pits of hell. It must have something within it that could be moved by truth and beauty. "Step away from my possessions," it said, "and I will not play with you before I kill you." I took an uncertain step back. The sword seemed to pull against my motion, resisting retreat. "Why did you come here?" I asked. "To destroy," the demon said, matter-of-factly. "To spread despair, blight, and ruin. To mix among you and make you think less of each other. To cause you to resent your lives and those around you. To make you suffer, as I have suffered." "You escaped from hell only to create it again?" It set its mouth into a grim line. "I can never escape. I was sent as were so many others, legions of us, disguised as mortals to fool the unwary, to add bitterness and hatred and overcrowding. I am only one among millions, a soldier with a mission to undertake. Now, hand over the Malum, that I may begin." "But this sword," I pressed, desperate to understand. "It could never work for you. Surely you could tell that. Why did you steal it?" "Steal it?" The demon grinned. "It was made for me when I was an angel." It saw the horrified expression on my face. Its smile widened. "We have been together for millennia, the Malum and I. Everything I have done, it has seen. It was there when I failed. It did not care. A sword knows only blood." I shook my head, denying the obvious falsehood of its words. Seeing me distracted, the demon charged. It was frighteningly fast, closing the distance between us in an eye blink. The sword in my hand was faster. It flashed upward as if it were responding to my thoughts. I thrust wildly outward, and the Malum slid gracefully into the demon's chest, slicing apart boiled leather skin to cut through vital parts within. The demon sagged at my feet, impaled almost to the hilt. Its clawed hands reached up weakly, scraping at my forearms before falling away. Its body teetered and collapsed, sliding free of the sword. It hit the ground at the edge of the pit, slid backward, and tumbled away into the darkness. Orange ichor dripped briefly from the Malum's blade. Moments later, it was free of the filth and once again clean and bright. It rejected the demon's blood as completely as I knew it must have rejected the demon itself. I regarded the sword, marveling at its purity. The demon had been lying, of course. One such as he could never have wielded a blade such as this. It would have twisted in his grip, refused to do his work. It was made to slay things like him, not to serve them. An idea began to grow in my head. Millions, the demon had said. Millions like him, sent here to divide and destroy us, all blending in. With the Malum Interfectorum, I could stop them. I could find and kill those who had come to ruin our world. Once they were dead, surely all would be able to see them for the demons they had always been. And even if not, I knew I had the power of rightness on my side. The Malum would let me do no wrong. I picked up the demon's armor, began to put it on. It fit like it had been made for me. I strode back to the house, feeling invincible in my enemy's armor. Tomorrow, I would begin my quest. Tomorrow, I would start to cleanse the world.
I have slept 6 hours in the past 8 days. Time is beginning to slow to a crawl, dragging my perception behind it like an anchor that just won't pull out from the mud. The more I try to organize my thoughts, the more muddled they get. I'm not going to lie here. I've had some brief hallucinations, but those came after. What started this was no hallucination, no dream. It's real, and I don't know if there's anything I can do about it now. I'm so tired that the thought of death doesn't scare me anymore. I don't know if I can explain how this started in a way that doesn't make it sound ridiculous. The day was normal, mundane. I went to work, I came home. Nothing out of the ordinary. I fell asleep on my couch while watching TV, which happens often. I'm a single man, and in a lot of ways, a simple one. I make myself a small dinner, watch some TV, and drift off by 9 or 10. All typical for me. The TV was on a timer and had long since shut itself off. All was quiet except for the low hum of the cold air blowing from the air conditioner vents. I stood and stretched, then made my way down the hall to my bedroom. I pushed the door open and fumbled for the light switch, finally flicking it upward. Light flooded the room. To my credit, I did not scream, but went into a sort of silent panic. There was an old man in my room. He was sitting in an aged chair, well worn and patched in places. He faced toward my bed, so I could only see his profile. His red flannel shirt was tucked into his belted tan slacks. I remembered the way the cuffs of his pants were high, showing his black socks. Liver spots stood out in contrast to the pale skin of his hands, and the only hair on his head was his thick gray eyebrows. His head was back, as if he were looking upward, the skin of his face drooping slightly. I stood there, unable to comprehend what was happening, because I lived alone, because I didn't know the man, and because the chair he was sitting in was on the ceiling. The roots that seemed to be holding my feet in place fell away, and I ran, fleeing back to the relative safety of the living room. I leaned on the back of the recliner, breathing heavy, not from exertion, but because it felt like my lungs had just decided to start working again. After a few minutes, I was nearly normal again, convincing myself that I had dreamed it, that I'd been half asleep when I got up from the couch. I walked back through the hall, shaking my head and feeling like an idiot. I passed the threshold into my room. He was still there. He turned his expressionless face towards mine, his loose skin hanging upside down, then tilted his head like he had a question. My chest tightened as I backed away slowly, his eyes following mine. I grabbed the doorknob in my sweaty fist and slammed the door shut. I didn't run down the hall again, afraid that if I gave into panic that it would get worse. I walked steadily, feeling teeth and knives and stares on the skin of my back. That sensation you can only get when you wake in the dark and have to walk to the bathroom alone, when you're trying to find your car in a lightless parking lot, when you're fumbling your house keys on your front step. You know that feeling. It's dread and terror threaded together into a shawl you wear over your shoulders when you're being chased. It must be what prey feels like. I made it back to the living room and bathed in the relief of safety. I turned on every lamp, the overhead lights, the TV, then flopped down on the couch. I thought sleep would elude me for sure, and it tried, but I finally dozed off. My sleep was thin, just a veil, and I could see through it. I dreamt the man hung over me, watching and waiting. When I woke, sunlight shot from between the curtains. I called my boss and apologized for not being at work and told him I was sick. It wasn't a lie exactly. There was something wrong with me. I just didn't know what it was. I went into the kitchen, and he was there on the ceiling. I screamed and fell against the counter, staring up at him. His face began to shake, the vibrations melting his features together into a blur of motion. The chair shot forward, tearing tracks into the ceiling and raining powder and debris across the tiled floor. I cringed harder against the counter, waiting for the attack. But none came. I opened my eyes, and he was gone. I dropped down to my knees in relief, my cheeks wet with tears that I don't remember making. The relief didn't last long, as I noticed the gouged lines in the ceiling. I got to my feet and ran, only stopping long enough to grab my shoes and car keys, and my wallet was thankfully still in my pocket from the day before. I drove around aimlessly for a while, my mind blank, unreality all around me. People came and went in cars, buses, or just walking down the sidewalk. The people were normal. No old man was creeping toward them every time they closed their eyes. An odd combination of jealousy and fear bloomed within me. Why was it happening to me and not them? I drove for hours, becoming more relaxed as the miles went on. There was a heat behind my eyes as I struggled to keep them open. I knew I had to pull over, but the thought was far away, and sleep was right here. It was right behind my eyes if I'd just let it take over. I fought harder, shaking my head from side to side and growling. I glanced in the rearview mirror at my bloodshot eyes. If I closed them for a quick moment, that would probably help. Just for a second. I woke and shot straight up in my seat, a death grip on the wheel as I pulled the car back onto the road, my tires squealing across the asphalt. My breath came and went in short bursts as my fingers thrummed with excited energy from the sudden infusion of adrenaline. I slapped myself hard across my cheek, relishing the sting. I passed a sign that read the next exit was 4 miles out. I steeled myself, muttering reassuring words that I'd make it. I'd find a motel, a parking lot, anything, if I could only sleep. But I didn't make it. I fell asleep and the exit passed untaken. When I woke, it was late afternoon, the trees casting long shadows across the highway. I shook my head in disbelief. I'd driven miles, a lot of miles, completely unaware, my brain on autopilot and keeping me between the lines. I was scared, terrified at the thought that I could have killed someone, and with that came shame. I was an idiot to be out on the road, but my mind was so muddled, it felt like I didn't even have a choice. Now I was awake enough to do something about it. I reached over for my phone to use the GPS to find the closest place to stop. My hand fell on a different hand. Its dry, papery skin cooled to the touch. I looked up and was face to face with the old man. He stared ahead, unblinking, unmoving. I pulled my hand back with a scream that echoed from every angle of the car's interior. I made myself small against the door, still screaming, feeling outright terror for the first time. It wouldn't end. My breath was infinite. The scream made my throat shake and my eyes bulge. He slowly turned his face to me, his lips drawn back into a shiny smile of coal-black teeth. His face shook once more, blurring and shifting. Darkness creeped into the edges of my vision and I began to fade, fainting, trying to escape into myself. I don't remember everything after that. I don't remember the car flipping, but I recall being weightless as I tumbled through the sky, remembering the force of the airbag as it erupted from the steering wheel and broke my face. My next fragments of memory were quick snapshots of riding in the back of an ambulance, the EMTs talking over me, and then in the hospital as I fought with people, doctors, nurses, someone. I fought and cried for them to keep me awake, to not let me sleep. It must have gotten bad because when I did wake, sometime later my hands were bound to the hospital bed. I sat up in bed with my face throbbing in time with my heartbeat. Within moments, a nurse was at my side asking how I was feeling. Did I remember anything? I shook my head and wished I hadn't. She listed off my injuries: 2 broken fingers, broken nose, fractured orbital bone, multiple abrasions on my face and chest. Apparently my left hand had been in front of my face when the airbag deployed, smashing the 2 together. I'd essentially punched myself in the face hard enough to break everything, and I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't. I was afraid of the pain, but I was more afraid of losing control, of laughing without stopping until I cried or screamed or both. But mostly, I was scared they'd sedate me. I gave her a half-hearted smile to show I was sane, to prove I wasn't a threat, and apologized for my outburst earlier. She took it in stride, saying pain can make you do all kinds of things, to not worry about it. She freed my hands and I thanked her. The trouble didn't start until I asked for coffee and was promptly told that I couldn't have water until the doctor said otherwise. Asking became begging, pleading, and all of a sudden I was on my feet and yelling. Security was called. I lashed out, crying that I didn't want to sleep, to please give me something to stay awake. I was forced onto the bed and restrained again. They held me as a nurse stabbed a new IV into my arm as I'd torn the first one out during the struggle. I bucked against my restraints, still screaming as she attached the syringe and pushed the plunger down. Everything slowed, and I was still begging when the drugs took hold, and I was asleep once more. If I dreamed of anything, I don't remember. I came awake slowly, my head turned to the side, drool leaking from the corner of my mouth. I was in a different room, the door closed, one window leading into the hall where the people would occasionally walk by, looking at tablets or charts. For a while I didn't move, or couldn't. I counted the slow beep of the monitors for some indeterminable amount of time. I felt surprisingly good, sore but rested, the meds keeping the pain at bay. I turned my face to the ceiling. He sat in his chair, staring at me, his drooping, wrinkled face just a few feet away from mine. A whine formed in the back of my throat, then escaped my lips, the sound like a chastised dog who'd done something wrong but didn't know what. He smiled down at me, his black teeth nearly glowing with the reflection of the fluorescent lights. I watched in silent horror as his face shook and split, his mouth open and wide, the skin of his face and neck rolling away in opposite directions, his body flowering, opening like a mouth into petals of dark red flesh. Its interior was exposed, a mass of cobweb tissue and tendon, shriveled blood vessels tied in strange knots, all leading umbilically to another head hanging in the middle of the mess like a swollen uvula. The head twisted and lunged, its jaw snapping towards me, showering me with its rancid spit. I screamed up at it, the foulness falling on my tongue, but I could not stop. It screeched in return, and we held that terrible harmony until black stars sprang newly formed in my eyes and I was gone again. I did eventually wake up in yet another room, this one with gray, padded walls. And here I am still. My doctor is having me write all this out, trying to reach the middle of the trauma, find the center so it can be cleaved open, its secrets spilling so I can finally start on the road to recovery. He just doesn't get it. There is no secret, no hidden closet with rattling skeletons, no sexual abuse, no mommy issues, no daddy issues, no nothing. I was having a typical day, and something bad happened. Something terrible happened. There is no reason. Bad things don't need a reason. Kids get cancer. Mothers die in childbirth. And I have an old man who is not an old man who waits for me to wake up so it can slowly drain my sanity away. He sharpens my terror like a pencil, always turning the blades around and around, shaving away until you can draw blood with its point. But the wood grows shorter until finally there's nothing left. That's where I am now, hoping and praying that I'm close to the end, that my fear can't get any sharper, and that I just break under the strain. I have slept 6 hours in the past 8 days, and I wish more than anything that the thing hanging above me would just kill me now.
My wife tells me she's cheating on me, about halfway through dinner. I work my way through the potatoes, the beans, and most of the meat before replying. Who? That doesn't matter. It very much does matter, I think. I imagine a 6'4", muscular, chiseled Greek god of a man fucking my wife. I think about the way he holds her. Is he gentle? Rough? And the noises she makes for him. Is she quiet? Does she scream for him? Michael. I'm working on the last of the chicken at this point, wondering if she's ever fucked both of us in the same day. Michael, listen to me. I want a divorce. I watch her for a while. Her jaw, the hollow of her neck. Is he better? What? Is he better than me? She purses her lips. I think she's going to tell me that he's just different, that she's sorry it had to be like this, and that she still loves me, really deep down. That it was a mistake, and no one could be better than me. But instead she replies, "Yes, Michael, he's better than you." She tells me that she's staying in the house until she finds a place to rent, whilst we sort this out. I say that maybe I should have the bed, and she tells me that, trust me, you don't. In our bed. Sleep on the couch, Michael. And so that's where I find myself, working my way through a bottle of expensive scotch I'd saved for a special day, and browsing the internet. My browsing is aimless, filthy, meandering, I lurch from website to website going nowhere. That is, until I see an ad. Your face, your porn. Do you want to live out your most disgusting, most depraved fantasies? Do you want to see yourself do it? Using state-of-the-art deepfake technology, we're able to show you what your deepest desires actually look like. See them played out across the screen. The things you've only spoken of in whispers that you've never even admitted to yourself. Take control of your life. Be the best version of yourself you can be. This is your face, your porn, your reality. I'm in a fuck it sort of mood, more than a little drunk, and I think that this might be the best way to get back at her. I don't even have to leave the comfort of my home, and I can see what I'd look like doing whatever I want. All those things I never told her, the things she'd never do, I can see it. The ad is blank aside from the text on the white screen. That, and a tacky gif of red lips blowing a kiss before running their tongue along their teeth. I watch the mouth on the ad blow kiss after lurid kiss at me, and start to feel convinced. They'll superimpose my face convincingly into any situation, and I'll watch myself carry out my darkest, deepest desires. There are different packages: celebrity, fetish, slice of life, narrative, and on. But one in particular catches my eye. Surprise me. And so, squinting so that I can read the numbers on my credit card, I subscribe. I fill out a quick form, what I'm into, my kinks, my age, name, that sort of thing. It then requires me to take a video of my face from different angles, then makes me cycle through a few basic facial expressions, takes a sample of my voice, saying a few basic sentences. Not long after, I pass out. I awake to a vicious hangover and a notification on my phone. An email containing the first video. YourFaceYourPurchase.mov. It's really me. Or at least, it looks exactly like me. It's night, and fake me seems to be followed by a camera. Fake me spends the evening going into various shops around town and buying tape and an apple from each store. He seems to make the cashiers nervous, and one girl even starts shaking while she tries to find the code for the tape when it won't scan. He is impatient, wraps his knuckles on the desks, calls her a bitch under his breath as he leaves. Wide shot. He walks down the street past the glassed window. The cashier is crying silently inside. That's it? I try to click forward to see if there's anything else, but that's it. I watched the whole thing expecting it to be the build-up to something, but no. Instead, all I see is something that looks exactly like me drive around town and buy apples and tape. I try to see if I can find the website again to cancel my subscription, but I can't find anything. I try and look through my history, but it's not there. In fact, there's just an empty gap between 1 and 3 a.m. Whilst it isn't porn, the technology behind it is still amazing. The person on the screen looks exactly like me. I don't go to work. I watch TV, drink beer, smoke inside. My wife, and she is still my wife, complains. I don't listen. Around 6 p.m., I receive another email. YourFaceYourGums.mov. The camera is focused on the me that isn't me, sat at a table. He's answering questions. It's my voice. My voice. He says he is sorry. He says he does not know. No, he never knew. He is fiddling with something in his mouth, above his teeth. He has never heard that name before. He says if they insist, but it's not like he'll like it. The voice behind the camera laughs. Close-up of his mouth. there is a thick, black hair protruding from his gum, just above his teeth. And he's trying to wiggle it loose. It isn't working. Until it does, and he pulls out a knot of tangled hairs from the pink of his gum. And they keep coming and coming and coming until there's nearly a foot of hair, and with each tug, it wobbles his front 2 teeth a little. He says this has never happened to him before. The voice behind the camera laughs again. I don't sleep that well that night. Something about the videos has unsettled me. They're too realistic. And watching that fake me fiddle with his gums made my mouth hurt. I say nothing to my wife when she comes in, making no effort to tidy the takeaway boxes from the table. She looks at me for a long, long time as if something is building up inside her, some thought or opinion about me she's always wanted to tell me. And I watch as it almost bursts out of her lips, and then nothing. I hear something look through our bins as I try to sleep. A raccoon? Someone homeless? They disappear when I get up to look. The notification wakes me up. Another video. I try to reply to the address that's sending me these, telling them I want them to stop, but the email bounces back. I have no choice but to watch. YourFaceYourTrash.mov. The me that can't possibly be me is eating at a new table. But the whole table is covered in trash, dirt, empty cans, pizza boxes, rotting fruit, bones, tiny crawling things, etc., etc. There are flies buzzing aimlessly about. He is shoveling as much as he can in his mouth. Coffee grounds spill down his chin, and he coughs. He keeps looking to the left of the camera. After swallowing, he winces, pulls something from his mouth. A razor. He has bitten a razor. His blood is dark and thick and mixes with the coffee grounds that dribble down his chin so that it looks lumpy and black. It coats his shirt and his hands as he attempts to wipe his face. He looks to the left of the camera again and continues eating. At this point, I consider deleting my email account. Something is wrong here. There is something in these videos that's beyond unsettling. I don't remember pulling half of those facial expressions, and his reactions are just like mine. It's too real. That's my wince. That's the wince of pain I know I do when I stub my toe or stand on a thumbtack or bite my tongue. But when I get up to fix myself a drink, I find my wife's car gone. And I know that she's with him, with this guy she's fucking. And I feel a stab of self-loathing that goes so deep it pierces my stomach and makes me retch. I watch the video again. Evening comes. YourFaceYourAnger.mov. He is carrying a bunch of grapefruit in his arms in the street. A small, old man bumps into him and the fruit go flying. They make this wet pop as they hit the floor, and in the noise you can hear the fibers that held the fruit together tear. The man is knocked over. The me that looks too much like me sees someone nearby drinking from a thermos, and, grabbing it, empties the scalding water all over the fallen man's face. Close up. The me that shouldn't be me spits on him and winks at the stunned crowd watching. The fallen man moans and spasms. I don't know why, but I sort of like this one. The noise of the fruit is so satisfying, so visceral, and there's something triumphant about the way fake me snatches the boiling water and pours it over the man. Fake me is in control. That evening, my wife tells me that she doesn't think she ever loved me. Not like the way she loves her new man. And that come to think of it, I'm not much of a man at all. She says this whilst I try and wipe ketchup from my shirt, but only succeed in getting some on the couch. When she goes to bed upstairs, I watch YourFaceYourAnger.mov over and over again. I doze. With my eyes half open, the me that isn't me, the fake me, winks at the camera. My heart gets faster. I pretend to be asleep and keep my eyes open just a sliver. Fake me walks away from the crowd, right up to the camera. Knocks on my screen a few times with his knuckles. It sounds like glass. He watches through the screen, smiling. His eyes are on me, I'm sure of it. He pushes his face against the camera, against my screen, and stares right at me. There is something behind those eyes. Behind that face. Something dark and waiting. He keeps watching me. I think he knows I'm awake. We stay like that until morning. YourFaceYourNeighbor.mov. He knocks on Mrs. Tay's door. He is holding an apple and tape. She invites him in. He enters. The camera follows. In one movement, he stuffs the apple in Mrs. Tay's mouth and forces her to the ground, where he binds her arms and legs with tape. Someone from off-camera hands him a hammer. Wide shot. Mrs. Tay struggles on the floor. The me that watched me looks through her records. Puts one on. It's old and slow, and the vinyl crackles as he drags her into the basement. The video continues for half an hour more, until the vinyl is finished and there is just a loop of a faint crackle. And then there are two thuds, a snap, and it ends. I can see someone's car I don't recognize in my driveway. It looks expensive. I go to investigate, but can't find anyone near it. And so I decide to go and check on Mrs. Tay. I stumble down the street in my dressing gown, face covered in patches of stubble, and knock on her door. No one answers. Bill Roberts walks past, and I wave at him. "Seen, Mrs. Tay today, Bill?" He shakes his head. I can tell he's trying not to react to how I look. Trying to be polite. I haven't, seen her in a week or so, Michael. A pause. He's finding the right words, I can tell. "You doing okay? You don't look so good." Never better. The combination of emotions I'm feeling is hard to put into words. I am elated. There is a version of me online who is in control and is acting. I am also terrified. Whatever it is on that screen knows about me, knows something about my life. I don't know if it is here, in this reality, or if it is just peering in. Either option makes my chest tight. I've drunk the house dry and have to make several trips to stock up on liquor. I even call a few old contacts and manage to get some pills, although I promise myself I'll only take them when things get really, really bad. YourFaceYourTrial.mov. The shortest video so far. The me I wish I was me pushes against his jaw, probing. Slowly, surely, he slides his hand under the skin of my face, until I can see the outline of my fingers under the skin, like 5 giant malformed veins. He wriggles the fingers, and the skin comes away from my face. My ring finger emerges from my eyelids. He pulls the hand out, and it is covered in some sort of embryonic fluid. He winks at the camera. At me? I try the same thing that evening after I've shaved, pushing my fingers into my face as if the skin is going to slip and I'll be able to do what he did. But nothing happens. My long nails cut the tender, freshly shaven skin, and I end up just moving my face the conventional way. I smile, then frown, then stick out my tongue, then puff out my cheeks. Once I'm convinced my face still works, I go to bed. I think my wife sneaks him in the back door. Her lover. Her Casanova. I can hear them fuck, I think. I can't wait for morning. Can't wait for a new .mov. I watch YourFaceYourTrial.mov on repeat to help me sleep. And when he is convinced I'm asleep, he comes right up to the camera again. But this time he fiddles with the edges, as if testing the boundaries. His breathing gets deeper, lustier. He cannot find a way out, so he just watches, cycling through expressions the way I did, convinced that I am asleep. Am I? When I wake up, there is a note from my wife telling me that she's moving in with him for a while. There is a voicemail from work telling me I'm fired, and that there will be no severance pay. YourFaceYourJunkies.mov. I finds a couple of junkies on the outside of town. He shows them a huge stack of cash and they both nod. They have about 6 teeth between them and walk with a pronounced stoop, taking him to an abandoned building on the edge of town. He says, "Go in ahead of me, I'll be right in." They pause for a while, trying to work out what the catch is, why this seemingly average guy would offer all this cash up front. But he hands them both small foil packages, and they quickly dash inside. As before, he slowly slips his hand under the skin of his face, working it up and up and up until both hands are completely under the skin. The camera pans down to the rusty gate that borders the property. He hangs something from the gate before walking down the overgrown path into the house. It takes me a while to realize that the thing hanging from the gate is a face. My face. Like a mask, the mouth and eyes are empty, and the skin flaps like a heavy flag in the breeze. There is the sound of cars driving past every few minutes. Then, 2 noises like grapefruit bursting, fibrous and wet and sudden. He walks back down the path and puts the face back on. I do not manage to see what lies under that face, but I desperately want to. I think my hair is falling out. I take a long walk around the block. When I return, I find my wife staring at my laptop as if she's seen the devil. She turns to me slowly. "What the fuck is this, Michael?" The laptop is positioned behind her back, so I can see the screen and her at once. I remember the contents of YourFaceYourJunkies.mov and start to panic. If that fell into the wrong hands, with no context, I can explain. The videos, they're not me. All of the places, the situations, they're fake, I think. She shakes her head. What situations? Jesus, Michael, it's just hours and hours of footage of you whispering to the camera? It's just your face. What's fake about that? I can tell she's a little scared. her disgust at me slowly morphing into something uglier, nastier. She takes a couple of steps back as if seeing me for the first time. Behind her, I can see the me that isn't me. The fake me smiling at the camera on the screen. The footage has paused, but he's still moving. Closer and closer to the camera, his eyes wide and with a rigor mortis smile. A smile as if he's just learned how to control the musculature of his face perfectly. And he's holding a finger to his lips. Shh. She takes another step back. I try and warn her, but no words come. Instead, I'm frozen in fear, seeing the fake me grow closer and closer to the camera, to the screen as her back's turned, and he's pushing against the glass of the screen, trying to find a weak point, a crack that will allow him to move from his reality into ours. She can't take it anymore. She turns around and without looking at the screen, she picks my laptop up and smashes it on the floor. You're sick. She leaves. The thought of the screen smashed for some reason terrifies me. It's as if whatever barrier was between me and that thing is broken. And although I can't see anything, I feel him leaking into our world. Like the soft hiss of gas through a broken pipe or air escaping a valve. I take the laptop to be fixed. Pay extra to make it happen as fast as possible. As soon as the screen is fixed, I take it home, desperate to turn it on, to see if there are any new videos to check on the old ones. I try loading YourFaceYourPurchase.mov. The first video I was sent. A familiar scene plays, except there's no fake me. It's the exact same footage, I'm sure of it, but the me that isn't me isn't there at all. The cashier still weeps, silently, but it's not due to any version of me scaring her. I try loading YourFaceYourAnger.mov. The same. The exact same video, but the fake me isn't there. The man still falls over, coffee is still poured on his face, the crowd still reacts, but there's no me. YourFaceYourJunkies.mov is now just footage of two junkies walking to a crack house and entering it. They still don't leave, but there is no face on the gate, nothing. No sign that I was ever there. The house suddenly feels so empty. I can hear the faint tap, tap, tap of the branches against the upstairs window, the gurgling of the drain. The way the old wood creaks ever so slightly with age. I am alone. And I know then that the reason he's not on the screen is because he's here. With me. As I feel sweat start to run down my back, I receive one final email. Your face, your turn. .mov. Wide shot. Me. But the real me this time. Alone. The room is full of trash, rotting food, empty beer bottles, liquor bottles smashed on the floor, pill bottles, crumpled clothes. The real me holds up a hand, waves it. This is live. This is real time. This is happening. Now. The room is dark. Objects are obscured, in shadow. Something moves behind the window. A curtain rustles. Bottles clink. He's in here, somewhere. Watching. Waiting. I am alone with myself. And I have all the time in the world.
Arnold Willis slowly opened his eyes, dreading what he would see. The small alarm clock on the nightstand read a merciless 5:58 a.m. The sterile hospital wall came into focus behind the clock, in sharp contrast to the brightly colored balloons which floated at the edge of Arnold's vision. 4 hours till doomsday, Arnold thought. Turning, he sat up heavily in the uncomfortable hospital bed, swinging his feet over the side as he put his weight on his legs. Crossing to the closet-sized bathroom at the far end of the room, he watched himself move forward in the thin mirror on the bathroom door. A 58-year-old man in white and blue striped pajamas came closer in the mirror. Overweight now, the image was once athletic, but not obese yet. Arnold protectively thought, with a mixture of pride and resentment. He noticed the beginnings of jowls on his face as he got closer, as well as the fact that his slightly receding hairline had retreated another quarter inch in the past few months. A small loss, but noticeable. Sucks to get old, he thought, entering the bathroom. He stared at the tired face in the small mirror over the bathroom's sink, while he knew he couldn't sleep anymore. He wished he could, and so debated whether or not to go through his morning routine. May as well get ready. Goddamn stress. Lousy freelancing rates, he thought to himself as he sighed and turned on the water. After shaving and washing and drying his face, he looked at himself again, his eyes slowly resting on top of his chest, which was exposed through the opening at the pajama top. Say goodbye, old friend, to that hunky chest, he said. By 1 o'clock, it looked like a cereal box top.
Mr. Wes, are you okay?
Asked a female voice outside the bathroom door. Arnold opened the door slightly to reassure the nurse. She was a pleasant, overweight black woman, even if her hair was always just a bit out of sorts. As okay as I'll be until Dr. Cut-em-Up gets a hold of me for my bypass, Arnold told her with a half-hearted smile. Why do you ask? The nurse was unnaturally serious. Please stay calm, sir. There's been an unavoidable delay. Your double bypass cardiac surgery has to be rescheduled for tomorrow. There's been an outbreak of some sort of new flu strain. We have many new patients coming. I'm sorry, but they're in more danger than you at the moment. At that, Arnold left the bathroom to speak with her, and in preparation to take an excuse to leave the hospital. Okay by me. I'll go home and come back tomorrow. What time? Actually, because the patients came in last night, you can't leave the hospital. You may have been exposed to it overnight. But if it makes you feel any better, none of the last night's staff can go home either. It doesn't, actually, Arnold said dryly. What else? He added, noticing that she wasn't done with what he now suspected was a spiel from the morning's overuse with other patients. To keep from getting infected, the nurse said, we need to keep your door closed. You can't come out unless it's a true emergency. You have a call button if you need us. And we know this is a smaller room, but all the patients mean we have to bring in someone here to share the space. Oh, don't worry, the patient we're bringing in, Mr. McNulty, has Alzheimer's, not the new flu. Terrific, Arnold said, making his way back to the bed. The good news is that the new guy, McNulty, rested peacefully since he was brought in. By 7:30, Arnold was watching the news for a while, as contently as he could be in his frustrating predicament, until his wife called. Arnold picked up his cell phone and spoke in low tones in deference to his new roommate. I know, honey. I still can't believe it either. If they just did it and got it over with, I'd be fine. It's the waiting that's the killer. Hon, I'm sorry. Really, I am. I didn't mean killer. It's okay. Mary, I'm gonna be fine, he said with more confidence than he felt. It's a simple procedure, he hoped. How are you? Do you have this flu? It's all over the news already. Okay, good. You stay home today. Don't go out. I'm fine. There's nothing happening here. I don't want you to catch this bug. Better yet, get into the storm shelter. Yes, I mean it. Take your pills with you. Promise me? Good. Okay, I love you. Bye. Hands folded behind his head, Arnold relaxed in bed, addressing Mr. McNulty in a whisper. Well, McNulty, old man, it's just you and me for the duration. I'm glad you don't talk much. Rest well. After dressing, reading half of a mediocre novel and watching a game show, around 12:30, Arnold was bored enough to simply pace around the room for something to do. He was hopeful physical movement would snap him out of his boredom. After an unsuccessful 25 minutes of this, a harried cafe worker came into the room, a tray in each hand. The food on the trays was so carelessly slopped on, Arnold wondered for a moment if any of the cataract patients were kitchen volunteers. Still, unappetizing as it may have looked, Arnold was grateful for the food, and for the break in tedium the lunch signaled. The cafe worker was an olive-skinned man, possibly Sicilian. He was in his 30s and stood only about 5 feet tall, but was powerfully built. He had a close-cropped haircut, which reminded Arnold of state troopers. But most of Arnold's concerned attention was attracted to the white mask over the man's nose and mouth, especially as the man looked tired enough to possibly be sick. Okay, here you go, the man said. About time. What's happening out there, man? I've called and called on the bell and no one's answering. I was about to go out and find someone. Oh no, you can't do that, the cafe man said. Didn't anyone tell you? The flu has spread in the hospital. Only essential people like me can go room to room. You leave here, man, you'll be quarantined with the sick ones. And brother, you don't want that. Besides, the man added, we're so short-handed. We're asking all relatively healthy patients like yourself to help the sicker ones. So, if you could please feed your roommate, we would really appreciate it. And I'm sure he would, the man said, pointing to the insensate Mr. McNulty. Annoyed but knowing it was his moral duty, Arnold took up a spoon and shook McNulty's shoulder gently to wake him. Thankfully, Mr. McNulty was as placid when awake as he was asleep. Stay in here. Really, it's hell out there, the cafe man said as he prepared to leave. This ain't no flu. It's a plague. But don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. Just stay calm, Mr. Willis. Don't strain your heart. After feeding Mr. McNulty and himself, Arnold turned on the television to, as his grandfather said, see what's all the hubbub, bub. Normally, the insipid talking heads on the news gave him a sense of ease, because nothing that important could be filled with the self-importance that most newscasters carried themselves with conveyed to the news. Unnervingly, Arnold didn't detect a trace of it today.
Disease spreading throughout eastern United States. People are warned to stay indoors. The CDC has declared an official pandemic. While
Arnold tried another channel.
toll is now in the thousands. The National Guard has been ordered to quarantine whole areas of infected. While no group has claimed responsibility, terrorism has not been excluded as the source.
Arnold tried again.
Ooh! I did shoot a pity tat.
A cartoon bird said.
You're detestable,
Said a cartoon cat, mildly on fire. Well, Arnold said, that's better. When the show ended a half hour later, Arnold sighed. Now, back to the unreality. Arnold clicked again.
The president has accepted the Nobel Prize for Health, awarded for his blowing his nose in a tissue during the first 5 minutes in office. In his acceptance speech, he told the world this current outbreak is nothing to worry about and that ATMs could be responsible for the lack of health to go around. Separately, the first animal infections of the new disease, now being called the Neo-Black Plague, have been reported this morning. It isn't just a human disease. When asked for comment, the administration has no information, and while there is no clear response to this crisis, told us that they were sure things would be fine if we just hoped enough.
Feeling queasy and sure it wasn't the earlier hospital food, Arnold clicked away. This time, he got a local news channel. Remarkable for the fact that it was broadcasting at 4 and not 5, and that the anchors, an Asian woman and a white man, didn't look very made up and showed signs of stress personally.
We have received reports that flu victims are reviving after a state that looks like death.
The Asian woman said.
People are warned to not call an ambulance if they believe a loved one has died and merely wait up to 4 hours for a recovery. Hunter, can that be right?
Yes, Kimmy,
the white announcer said.
That is correct. I checked it myself.
To hell with this!
Arnold yelled, snapping off the television and throwing down the remote, startling Mr. McNulty. Grabbing his overnight bag from under the bed, Arnold changed into jeans and a flannel shirt and blessed his wife's over-worrying heart. When he saw she put his light jacket in the bag, even though it was mid-June, he wrapped the jacket around his neck. It wasn't a hospital germ mask, but it would have to do. Looking over, he saw McNulty looking at him kindly.
Okay, George, no one's coming for hours or answering the bell. You stay here, hold down the fort. I'm gonna go find someone. I'll be back for you, pal.
Affixing the jacket over his mouth and nose, Arnold opened the door, marched through, and closed the door firmly behind him, making sure it was locked to safeguard McNulty. Arnold's room was at the head of a T-intersection of the hospital hallways. As he stood there, Arnold could see down all 3 hallways for some distance. What he smelled and saw made his weary heart jump. The smell was a pervading stench of rot and feces in the hallway. Unfortunately, this was not like rotten food nor milk, and not like a regular bathroom interlude. Rather, it was the stench of roadkill left in the sun, and of a similarly sunny horse stall uncleaned for a week, mixed with soiled old folks' home. There wasn't a lot of air movement in the halls, but when the air did move, Arnold almost wished it hadn't. Something was almost familiar about the decay, and it took a moment for Arnold's brain to remember what it was. It was the same smell, many more times powerful, that he smelled behind the camphor and formaldehyde at his uncle's funeral 6 months ago. His uncle, poor soul, was a bachelor and wasn't found for a full day after he passed away.
Son of a bitch. Flew my ass,
he thought, not daring yet to open his mouth. Ahead of him to the left and the right, the halls were filled with patients, if you could call them that. Oh, a few were coughing, and fewer were lying deathly still, but the majority were alert and moving. They were trying to walk or crawl away, insensible to the fact that they were strapped or chained to cots, or even chained to radiator pipes and door handles. The worst were the ones chained to gurney legs, because they made some progress. Pathetic and circular though it may have been, because they might actually cause someone harm in the arc they were able to reach. They were people of all shapes and sizes, but for all their differences were frighteningly similar. They were awake, but none were fully alert. Their skins were an ashen pallor, most showing festering wounds in 1 or 2 places. Most were slack-jawed, and there wasn't a shortage of drool on their clothes. Some, Arnold noted, and though he didn't need any more convincing, if he did, this would be it, were missing limbs or had clawed their intestines out, but continued to ambulate as if they didn't even notice. But the worst of it all was their eyes. Every last one of them, without exception, had a thick white glaze over their irises and pupils. It looked as if they had full blinding cataracts, making sight impossible. However, Arnold knew that when they turned their heads towards him in passing, he most definitely was seen by their eyes. But that wasn't the end of the fear. Equally frightening, or possibly more so, was the fact that Arnold could look back into these eyes and see that there wasn't anything behind them. If the poet was right, and the eyes are the windows to the soul, then these were vacant houses indeed.
These are the undead,
Arnold thought. Sloughing against the doorframe, Arnold massaged his chest with one hand, irrationally trying to slow his rapid heartbeat with his hand, while breathing through his mouth, slowly.
Calm down, old boy. Calm down,
he told his heart.
That's right.
He cooed to his heart as it slowed.
Okay then. First things first,
he murmured to himself. Looking down the hallway ahead of him, Arnold saw something he'd need. Straightening up, Arnold moved down the hall directly ahead of him, as close to the plumb center of the hall as he could, and as evenly paced as possible to fool the noisome predators around him. Some of the zombies noticed him and feebly tried to reach him, but most did not take notice. Reaching the mop and bucket he saw from his room doorway, Arnold grabbed the mop and pulled it away in a smooth motion. Luckily, the mop was almost dry.
This will do for now,
he thought. A few paces later, a thin zombie with a thin red beard and widow's peak noticed Arnold, and for no discernible reason, lunged for Arnold. Moving swiftly, Arnold pulled the mop up and forward, using one arm as a fulcrum and the other to shove. The mop caught the zombie full in the nose and mouth, pushing him back.
Shut up, you!
Arnold told it. Reflexively, Arnold thought to himself that he was glad reality hadn't hit him yet. And his mind then made a conscious effort to push reality away again, or else dissolve into a screaming mess who couldn't move. After the first couple of tries, it became relatively easy for Arnold to whack tied-up zombies out of his way as he made his way down the halls. After that, it almost became fun for Arnold. He began to talk to the zombies that he had to deal with, adding insult to injury.
Hey, nice job! How much did they cost?
He asked one female zombie with big blonde hair, body rotting everywhere except her perfect, shining, plasticky breasts.
I pity the fool who gets in my way,
he told another one, a black man who, with half of his cranium gone, looked like he was sporting a mohawk.
And you need to move it, and especially you, meathead.
He called to two groaning zombies as he mopped them aside, then to one missing a leg, and another who reminded him of a young Rob Reiner for some reason he couldn't put his finger on. Then again, neither could the zombie, seeing as it no longer had any fingers. By the time Arnold came into his fourth hall, he was feeling confident and even smiling a little.
Piece of cake.
His last word trailed off, and with it, his confidence, for as he turned the corner into this new hall, he saw two new zombies at the other end of the hall, which were different than the others. They were different because they were unchained. The two zombies, both men, were once a security guard and nurse respectively, and one still clung to his taser, and the other to surgical knives, even if their brains weren't aware of that anymore. What the zombies were aware of, however, was how hungry they were, and of Arnold. Turning, Arnold ran for his life back down the hallway he just came from. One quickly stolen glance over his shoulder confirmed Arnold's worst fears,
The two undead were definitely chasing him. One saving grace from God Arnold noticed in that split-second look was that the zombies were able to lope along if they tried, but seemed unable to fully run.
Must be the rigor mortis setting in.
A corner of Arnold's brain noted to help keep his panic in check. The security guard was in front of the nurse, but that only stood to reason, as the guard must have been more used to running in life. Noted this same cranial corner. Arnold now used the mop as a hockey stick, shoving the tied-up zombies out of his way like putrid hockey pucks. His heart thundered against his chest. Looking ahead, Arnold saw one of the tied-up zombies had managed to free himself of his chain, and the waist and legs that went with it, and had put himself in the center of the hall, right in Arnold's way. Desperate, Arnold turned the mop around to use the top of the handle like a sword, and, hands midway up the shaft, he sliced downwards, while hoping that the zombie's head was decayed enough to collapse under a hard, sharp blow. Arnold was rewarded not only by the skull caving in, but sinking the mop handle almost down to the zombie's nose, making the former head look like a gory, miniature parting of the Red Sea, complete with the staff of Moses. It was a moment before Arnold registered the heavy thud that told him his luckiest break, if not a true miracle, had indeed occurred behind him. As Arnold arced the mop handle downward in front of him, the mop head behind him came up, catching the zombie security guard in the knees. The speed with which the zombie was loping caused the mop head to push the guard back, as it severed the zombie's legs at the knees. The legs went flying backward, and the zombie's trunk fell straight down, then fell backward on impact with the ground and mop head, landing the zombie on his back, just out of reach of Arnold. Looking over his shoulder again, Arnold's heart squeezed hard once, then released as he appreciated what just happened. Grabbing the closest gurney that, except for the zombie strapped firmly onto the bed, was void of other zombies, he twirled it around to block the hallway in the still pursuing orderly, and then dropped to pull the gun away from the floundering security guard. "Ha!" Arnold exclaimed as he worked the gun free, taking care to pull the index finger out of the trigger guard once he stood up again, not bothering to free the mop pinned under the legless zombie guard. Noticing a door marked exit to his left, Arnold made for it. Before he could reach it, he saw another zombie, a tall, strong-looking zombie in overalls, crossing the hall ahead of him. Instantly, he pushed into the nearest room to avoid detection. Slamming the door, he waited a minute or more, and when he was sure the zombie didn't notice him and kept on going, breathed a sigh of relief. "Hi," said the voice behind him. Arnold's heart pounded through his ribs as he spun and nearly shot a man, a living human, who was sitting upright in a chair by the window in the room. Whoa, man," the other man said, hands up like an old western. "Don't shoot. I didn't do it." "Oh God, you nearly scared the hell out of me," Arnold said. "Yeah, guess so," the sitting man said. "But then again, from what I've seen out my window, these are crazy times." "Yeah," was all Arnold could say. "I'm Mike," the sitting man said. "Arnold, I'm pleased to meet you," Mike said. "How are things out there?" Insane. Unbelievable. They're the undead zombies. Oh, just all over," Arnold replied, now shaking at the sound of what he was saying. "Yeah," said Mike, quietly. "I figured." "Well," Arnold said, swallowing hard, "now that I'm here, you want to come along? With me, I mean. I only got one gun, but it can protect the both of us." "I'm afraid not, Arnold." "What?" Arnold said incredulously. "Why ever not?" Apparently, you're not too observant," Mike said, pointing to his wheelchair in the corner of the room. Oh God. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do. Arnold began. There's not much to do, Mike said in a peaceful calm. It's fairly obvious. I've thought it through these past few days. You can't take me with you. I weigh 170. I'm sure things are quite troubling enough for you. I'd likely just ensure your death, as I would my own if we tried it. Then what? Arnold was confused. I had settled into the idea of drinking enough water from the tap over there if I can manage it, Mike said. Little known but true fact. Drinking too much water too fast can lead to death. But now, my friend, I've been brought your intercession. You have no idea how happy I am to see you, Mike said, staring at Arnold's gun. Arnold finally understood. Oh, no. It would be murder. Not if you give the gun to me, Mike said evenly. Please. But it would still be... Give me the fucking gun, Mike screamed. I don't want to die any slower than I have to. And certainly not by being eaten to death. Shocked, Arnold walked over mechanically and tossed the gun into Mike's lap. There, Mike said calmly again. That wasn't so hard. I assure you, you're doing me a merciful service. Turn away. Cover your ears, please. Arnold did as he was asked. A moment later, ears ringing, Arnold picked up the gun again from where Mike had dropped it, trying not to look at the mess on the wall and window. Still dazed, Arnold checked the hallway carefully and quietly left the room. Making his way down the hall silently, Arnold went through the exit door he had seen earlier and came to a stairwell. His shock wearing off, he began running down the steps. He could tell his heart was slower now, but still faster than it should have been. He began to pray silently as he made the second landing down.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
On the fourth landing, Arnold chanced a door because, looking down the stairwell, he saw it terminated in a dark concrete and not the exit he had hoped for. If he had to get through the first floor, he might as well try this one, he reasoned, because who knew which floor was more vacant than others? He couldn't see any zombies through the door's rectangular glass pane and hoped that view was true. Immediately on walking to the fourth floor, he wished he hadn't. What he couldn't see through the door were the 3 zombies crouched on the floor, feasting on an unlucky patient. The wet chomps, pulling noises, and diffusion of blood made for a scene so horrifying Arnold couldn't turn from it. Covered in the black ore of their infernal banquet was a little Japanese girl, no more than 7. A thin white man, still wearing the remains of glasses on his irisless face, and the heavy black nurse who spoke to Arnold that morning. He was still praying aloud without knowing it, until he saw one of the zombies stop eating and wait, as if listening for something.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death.
Looking around quickly, Arnold noticed the door just a few steps ahead of him, on the left side of the hallway. Without thinking about it, he ran and ducked into the door, without even bothering to read the stenciled words on the frosted glass. Just as the zombies were beginning to turn their heads towards him. Safe. His mind cried out to him as, in reaction, his heart began to jackhammer, knowing it had now a moment's rest where his body could react to the insanity around him. Through the pain and the cold, Arnold kept sitting flush up against the door to keep quiet and to use his body as a door brace. He kept his eyes locked on the frosted glass portion of the door, gun at the ready, for any signs of zombie shadow. Once or twice he saw shadows pass, moving towards the stairway where the 3 zombies thought he was still in, and then again as they moved away and others shambled through. Each time he saw a shadow move by, his heart leapt again, causing Arnold to bite his tongue and lips lest he grunt or cry out in pain. After a while, there were no more shadows on the other side of the glass, and his body finally began to relax. His breathing became more ragged, gasping in air, as he felt his heart finally calm down. First only a bit, then more, a bit more. A spike. In reaction to a sound, but then moving down, down, down. The adrenaline line into rest. Slumping now, Arnold felt safe enough for a moment to even close his eyes, to both feel his resting body more and clear his mind of the horrors of the day. Arnold snapped his eyes open in shock, his pulse skyrocketing again as he realized those noises were not coming from the hall, but from inside the darkened room. His eyes adjusted to the dusky room. He looked down the large room to see that after a few feet, it was filled, on both left and right sides, with drawers and drawers of bodies. He didn't question the cold before now. Arnold looked up at the frosted glass on the door and finally read the stenciled letters. EUGROM. Oh, morgue. Oh, God. Arnold whispered, throwing open the door. Arnold made a mad dash across the hall to the next nearest door he could find. In his terror, Arnold didn't notice the floor was now empty of zombies as he threw open the nearest door on the opposite side of the hall. Not labeled with any words this time, Arnold noted and slammed it behind him. Miraculously, this office door had a lock on it which could be locked from the inside, something Arnold took immediate advantage of. This time, standing up against the door, heart hammering, Arnold alertly looked around this new room. He saw it was an empty administrative office, so small it was for just one doctor. There was a big desk on the far end of the room, a filing cabinet that stood in line with the door in the middle of the room, its side facing the door, and a coat tree diagonal the door with a few lab coats and a hat on its pegs. Having made sure there was nothing in the room to be afraid of, Arnold's gaze rested on the full-length mirror that was glued to the filing cabinet. Arnold got a bit of a shock looking in the mirror, because, for the first moment, he didn't recognize his own face. Haggard, strained, and pale with fright, Arnold took a moment to calm down again. In those moments, his eyes were fixed on the mirror. His legs, which carried him miles running after college when living in his first real apartment, were shaking and seemed so thin. So slow. I'm just not fast anymore. His stomach, hovering over his legs like a deflated balloon, once followed up straight. Where did all that weight come from? It's just... How did I let myself get this way? He tried to keep exercising once his career took off, but the more overtime he put in, the less time he had. That time became nothing after his kids were born. He saw that every moment then was a nail in his coffin now. His once developed arms slawed at the top before whittling down to forearms, just better than padded sticks. Those arms that had lifted so much weight in high school and now felt the weight of a simple gun. Weak. And again, those jowls just now developing at his jaw taunted him again. Old. Oh, Mary, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. How had it gone so wrong?
How did he let himself live so that he needed surgery at this age? How did age do this to him without his seeing it? Looking at a man who was running for his life, running slowly through the pulling tide of time and soft living, and remembering the man he had been was suddenly too much. Slumping against the door now for support instead of defense, Arnold knew he could blame no one but himself. His heartbeat slowed, and not from relaxation. Arnold cleared his head suddenly and straightened up, heartbeat firm. No time for regret now. Now he had to get home to Mary. Broken and old as he was, he still loved her, and that counted for something. Going over to the office window, he looked out and down. It was still a sunny day without a cloud in the sky, thankfully. He was only 3 floors up. The last floor in the stairwell must have been to the basement, he thought, overlooking a small parking lot. There was even a swath of grass and a young tree almost directly below the window. But he didn't notice the tree at first, his attention taken instead by the dead man outstretched in the parking lot, disemboweled and clearly chewed on. Poor bastard, Arnold thought. His thought of the victim was cut off suddenly when Arnold caught a glint of sunlight at the top of the body next to the small dark shape. Arnold's eyes were still good enough to make out the car keys in the dead man's hand.
Oh, please. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Have mercy on that man's soul,
he thought rapturously, putting the gun in the back of his waistband and taking the lab coat from the coat tree. Arnold made an impromptu rope and secured one end to the desk after pulling the desk to the window as quietly as he could. Making sure no one was around, Arnold shimmied down the rope, friction burning his hands and, strangely enough, halfway down the rope, flashing on the Adam West Batman show of his youth. At the end of the lab coat rope, Arnold had to drop about 4 feet to the ground. He held his breath in preparation to let go, not so much in anticipation of the pain, but to prevent him from making noise on landing and attracting any roaming undead. With a muffled grunt, he landed on the grass. Ugh! Pulling out the gun again, Arnold ran to the dead body and snatched up the car keys. He was seized with a moment of panic when he looked down the parking lot aisles to see it filled with cars, until he remembered the car alarm remote on the keychain. Looking around swiftly, Arnold knew he had to risk it. The alarm sounded ridiculously loud in the quiet lot. The car was only a third of the way down the aisle, which was lucky for Arnold, for, sure enough, the alarm also alerted 2 zombies to his presence. One who came up from the grass on the far side of the cars to Arnold's right, and the other between 2 cars on the far end of the parking lot. Arnold ran for the car, his finger hitting the alarm button again to stop the noise lest more zombies appear to add to the one now loping directly towards him and the other at the 2 o'clock position from the grass. Thankfully, the zombie in the grass, though closer to him, had trouble negotiating the parked cars. Once freed of the cars, it was a mere 10 feet away from Arnold. Thinking even he couldn't miss, Arnold aimed and fired, hitting the zombie right in the head. Recovering from the recoil and the sharp pain in his arms and shoulders, heart hammering, Arnold made it to the car and got in, slamming the door as the other zombie came into view in the car's rear view mirror, painfully turning the key in the ignition. Arnold grabbed the shift and stabbed at the gas pedal, running over the second zombie in reverse. Hitting the car directly behind him stopped Arnold's reverse progress, and shifting once more, but not as painfully as the first time, Arnold drove for all he was worth. Driving through town, Arnold saw things that were worse than he had first thought. Stores were broken into. There were precious few on the streets, and the people he saw were all panicked, if not running away. He didn't know if it was the sound of the car doing that, but he didn't think so.
Most streets were devoid of cars. Thankfully, though, he'd watched enough movies to not even bother risking the highway, or even the main roads like Route 926. Firmly sticking to town roads and side streets, he made it home and only had to drive on the grass 3 or 4 times to get around abandoned cars. He turned onto his street slowly to lower the noise and also to search the area well for any random zombies. Seeing a clear path all the way to his house, he accelerated quickly and made a fast turn into his drive and cut the engine. Finally being home sent his heart leaping into his throat with relief and love that he had made it, and fear that he had a house to come home to, but no longer a home. He sat listening a moment through the slightly opened windows, heard nothing, and cautiously got out. He went up to the front door and tried the knob. Thankfully, it was still locked. He saw the windows were boarded up and was about to open the door with his keys until he thought to check the back door as well. No use in making it all this way just to walk in and be taken down by zombies in his living room who came through the back door. As quietly and as quickly as he could, he circled his house and up the 3-deck steps, crossing lightly lest there be a zombie under the deck, though even he thought he was being a bit paranoid now. He gently tried the back door, also locked. Confidently opening the door, he stepped inside, not wanting to call out to his wife above speaking voice in fear of attracting attention. Arnold walked through every room. The house was deserted. He stopped the cold feeling in his mind by reminding himself of his own directions to Mary to get into the storm shelter. Leaving the house after packing a briefcase and taking care to lock the door, Arnold made it to the storm doors in the backyard unnoticed. He tried twice to open the doors unsuccessfully, and then, looking around nervously and licking his suddenly dry lips, he knew he had to call out for her.
Mary! Open up! It's me!
A scrabbling sound followed by clicks and a dragging of chains inside alerted Arnold to stand back so his wife, or whoever was in there, could open the doors. The doors flew open, and Arnold's heart almost stopped in relief to see his wife standing inside.
Oh, Annie!
She said as she began to cry. Arnold came in quickly and re-secured the door. Then turning to his wife, he looked at her, just to see her again. Her small lensed glasses were crooked on her face, and she had a mark near her ear. Her bun hairdo was disheveled, but still loosely intact. She was his age, but not overweight at all due to him, superior genetic makeup. But at the moment she looked wan, and on the edge of nervous exhaustion.
I thought...
She began, crying again.
There. Everything's okay. I'm too stubborn to kill,
he said, taking her in his arms. He knew then that no matter what happened outside, everything would be all right.
You didn't have the surgery?
She said dazedly after calming down.
Nah, I didn't have the time. All the zombies were ushered in first as patients,
he told her.
Good thing, too. In retrospect, I mean, it would have been harder to run wheeling a couple of IVs and all,
he said with a tired smile.
Did you meet anyone else? Is the tide turning?
She asked. Arnold stayed silent.
But then, what if...
She said, almost crying again.
Hey!
He mildly rebuked.
No what if? I really think that takes a back seat to what's going on out there. We have to think in terms of tomorrow, day by day, not in terms of what if. We have 3 months' food here, right?
She nodded.
But even if it does,
he continued,
then it does. But even if so,
he continued, opening the briefcase
and showing her all of the medication and poisons he could find in the house.
I've already gotten it taken care of.
The snow in the Wilsons' backyard was untouched, covering the ground in a smooth blanket. It seemed to wash away the horror of the summer months in cool sterility and enveloping silence. Then slowly, a rhythmic crunching was heard. As it drew closer, 3 zombies entered the backyard, foraging for food and scarring the snow with each shaky step. One zombie turned his head as he caught a scent. It sniffed once, twice. It called, catching the scent of food, bloody saliva dripping from its shredded mouth. It slowly veered its shambling path to the right to get to the storm doors jutting out from the ground. The other 2 followed the first. The first one began banging on the doors, shaking the snow off in the effort. Then, the other 2 zombies joined in the assault, having also caught the scent until, after 2 hours' work, they had punched in the doors completely, and the left side door fell off the hinge with an icy crack and shriek of metal. The second zombie half fell, half climbed in, followed by the others. Inside the storm cellar, a single bare bulb still burned. The monsters saw 2 figures lying in the bed at the rear of the shelter, arms wrapped around each other for warmth. The first zombie licked its teeth in anticipation, its lips having rotted away completely long ago. Pushing the second zombie out of the way, he moved forward to be the first to feast on the prize it had discovered. But moving forward, its face fell, its hollow, irisless eyes showing the despair of hunger unsatiated. It sniffed again for confirmation. The other 2 did the same, and similar expressions of disappointment crossed their hellish faces. Arnold and Mary lie there on a pile of bedding, pillows lining the crease where the 2 cots they pushed together met. Wrapped in each other's arms, they were peaceful in death, not even rotted much due to the cold. Empty ration tins and pill bottles strewn everywhere. But the monsters could now smell the poison that flooded the carcasses, something they couldn't smell before. With rage and what could be called sadness to the hungry beasts, they turned and shuffled away.
Chilling tales for dark nights.